My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The ringtone I'd assigned to James, my chief of staff, cut through the tense silence of my parents' Connecticut dining room like a knife. The specialized alert tone reserved only for genuine emergencies made my mother pause, mid-sentence, her fork hovering over her plate. Around the table, 7 pairs of eyes turned to me, most of them already preparing to judge whatever mundane bank teller crisis they assumed was interrupting our Thanksgiving dinner. "Excuse me," I said quietly, already pushing back my chair. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Sarah," my mother sighed. "Can it wait until after dinner, Rachel?" My younger sister couldn't resist. Her voice carried that familiar condescending lilt as she stage whispered to Jennifer, my brother's wife, probably her branch manager, calling. "Maybe someone needs help balancing the cash drawer." I didn't respond. I was already walking toward the hallway, my heart rate picking up, not from my family's mockery, which I'd endured for 7 years, but from the specific pattern of James's calls. 3 vibrations meant critical. This was the 4th. "James," I answered, my voice shifting automatically into the tone I used at work. Cool, controlled, authoritative. "What's happening, Sarah? Thank God. We have a situation. Continental CEO just resigned. Scandal broke 20 minutes ago. The entire $50 billion merger is about to collapse. The board is in chaos. Chairman Morrison is asking for you specifically. He said, and I quote, 'I need the best person we have on this immediately.'" I closed my eyes, already running through the implications. Continental Banking Corporation. 50 billion. The merger we'd been facilitating for 8 months. If it fell apart now, the ripple effects would devastate the regional economy. "Where's the board now?" I asked. "Fairfield Country Club. About 15 minutes from your parents' house, actually. Morrison's already en route. He wants you there. Tell him I'm on my way. Have the car ready." I ended the call and took a breath, staring at the family photos lining the hallway. Every graduation, every achievement, every milestone. Marcus and Rachel featured prominently. I appeared in the background of most, or not at all. Before you hear how this night ended, before I tell you about the look on my family's faces when Chairman Morrison walked through that door, let me take you back to where this evening really began. Because what happened next, the moment that shattered 7 years of carefully maintained silence, only makes sense if you understand what led up to it. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment below telling me about a time someone underestimated you. Your story matters. Now let me tell you mine. The drive to my parents' house always filled me with a specific kind of dread. Not fear exactly. More like the weary anticipation of a soldier heading back into familiar combat. I knew the territory. I knew the tactics. I knew exactly how the evening would unfold, beat by predictable beat. It started 3 weeks earlier when my mother called to confirm I'd be attending Thanksgiving dinner. Her voice had that particular brightness that meant she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't like. "Of course, sweetie, and we're so looking forward to it. Your cousin Kevin will be there too." You remember Kevin. Robert and Patricia's son. He just got promoted at that hedge fund. Managing over 200 million now. Such an impressive young man. I thought you two could talk shop, both being in finance. I'd gripped my phone tighter, staring out my office window at the Manhattan skyline. "That sounds nice, Mom. And Marcus and Jennifer are bringing their new investment portfolio to show your father. Marcus has done so well this year. The bonuses in private equity are just astronomical. Jennifer was telling me they're looking at properties in the Hamptons. Good for them. Rachel's startup is taking off too. Did you see her latest Instagram? 50,000 followers now. She's becoming quite the influencer in the crypto space. Everyone wants to know her secret. I'm happy for her, Mom." There was a pause. Then, in that carefully casual tone that mothers use when they're about to strike at something tender, "And how are things at the bank, dear?" "Still at that branch on Maple Street. Still working in banking, yes. Well, that's steady work. Stability is important too. Not everyone needs to be a high achiever. Your father and I were just saying at least you have good benefits. That's more than a lot of people can say." I'd ended the call shortly after citing a meeting I needed to prepare for. Which was true. I always had meetings to prepare for. When you're responsible for 50 billion in assets and the stability of 312 financial institutions, meetings are your life. But I didn't tell her that. I hadn't told any of them, not in 7 years. The decision to keep my actual position private hadn't been calculated or malicious. It had been exhausted. It started at my first Thanksgiving after the appointment. I'd been 26 years old, the youngest regional director in Federal Reserve history, and still naive enough to think my family would be proud. I'd walked in that door 7 years ago, practically glowing with accomplishment, ready to share my news. Marcus had cut me off before I'd finished my second sentence. Regional director. That's like a fancy title for branch manager, right? They do that now, inflate titles so people feel better about lateral moves. My firm does the same thing. Make someone a vice president when they're basically senior analysts. My father had nodded sagely. Smart of them. Good for morale. But Sarah, what's the actual role? What do you do day to day? I'd tried to explain. Monetary policy implementation. Supervisory oversight of major financial institutions. Crisis management and systemic risk assessment. The words had felt important in my mouth, true and significant. Rachel had laughed. Not meanly, not then. Just dismissively. That sounds super complicated. So basically you help run a bank branch. That's cool, I guess. Not as exciting as Marcus's merger deals, but someone has to do the regular banking stuff. And I'd felt it then, that wall of assumption. They'd decided what my job was, filtered my explanation through their preconceptions, and arrived at a conclusion that made sense to them. Anything I said to contradict it would sound like defensiveness, like exaggeration, like a middle achiever trying to inflate her importance. So I'd stopped trying. Over the years, their assumptions had calcified into certainty. I worked at a bank branch. Probably as a teller, maybe as an assistant manager if they were feeling generous in their assessments. It was respectable but unimpressive. Stable but uninspiring. The kind of job that confirmed their narrative about me, the least remarkable of the three Williams children. Now 7 years later, I pulled into that same circular driveway in my Audi A8. It was a beautiful car paid for in cash, but I'd deliberately chosen black and kept it understated. Nothing that would prompt questions I didn't want to answer. I sat for a moment, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I dressed carefully. A simple black dress from Nordstrom, not Chanel. Pearl earrings from my grandmother, not the diamonds Marcus had assumed I couldn't afford. I'd learned to calibrate my appearance to match their expectations. Successful enough not to embarrass them, but not so successful as to challenge their assumptions. My phone buzzed with a priority alert from the trading desk. I glanced at it. Unusual activity in the overnight repo markets, but nothing that required immediate intervention. I made a mental note to have someone monitor it through the holiday and put the phone on silent. I owed my family this much. These few hours of pretending their opinion mattered, of letting them feel superior, of maintaining the fiction that I needed their advice and their pity and their disappointed concern. The front door opened before I reached it. My mother stood there in a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her expression already doing that complicated thing where she was simultaneously glad to see me and disappointed by what she saw. Sarah, darling. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like Chanel No. 5 and subtle judgment. You look tired. Are you getting enough sleep? You work such long hours. I'm fine, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving. Come in, come in. Everyone's here. We were just having drinks in the living room before dinner. Your father opened that Bordeaux he's been saving. The 2005? You remember the year Marcus graduated from Wharton? Of course it was. Every good wine in this house commemorated one of Marcus's or Rachel's achievements. None of them marked my graduation from Yale or my Rhodes Scholarship or my appointment to the Federal Reserve. Those accomplishments had been met with polite praise and immediate subject changes. The living room was exactly as I remembered. Expensive furniture arranged with professional precision, abstract art that cost more than most people's cars' floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured lawn. And there, arranged like a portrait of success, was my family. My father stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, in conversation with Uncle Robert. Both men had that particular bearing of successful surgeons, Robert still practicing, while my father had retired early to manage his investments and golf handicap. Marcus sat on the leather couch arm around Jennifer, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a private equity recruiting brochure. Jennifer's engagement ring caught the light, a 3-carat diamond that she'd spent their entire engagement party making sure everyone noticed. Rachel was cross-legged on the ottoman, phone in hand, probably live streaming to her followers. She'd built an entire brand around being a young female entrepreneur in crypto, all confidence and motivational quotes and carefully curated images of her luxury lifestyle. Aunt Patricia held court by the window, her Hermes scarf arranged just so, discussing something about charitable giving with my mother. Uncle Robert occasionally interjected with comments about tax strategy. And then there was Kevin. 25, Wharton MBA, still fresh, sitting in the accent chair like he owned it. He'd been recruited straight out of school by one of the big hedge funds, and from what I'd overheard at last year's Christmas dinner, he'd made more in his first year than most people made in 5. Sarah, my father boomed. There she is. Come get a drink. We were just discussing Kevin's promotion. I accepted a glass of wine and settled into the remaining chair, the one positioned, so I could see everyone but wasn't quite part of any conversation group. Kevin grinned at me. Hey, Sarah. Good to see you. Still, at that bank in Hartford, Connecticut, yes? That's cool. Banking is solid. Steady work. His tone made it clear what he thought of steady work. I've been trying to learn more about traditional banking, actually. The firm is looking at some commercial banking investments. Maybe you could give me some insights. Like, what do you guys actually do all day? I sipped my wine. Process transactions mostly. Keep things running. Right. He nodded enthusiastically. The backbone of the system. Somebody's gotta do it. I just couldn't imagine, I need the adrenaline of the market, the big deals. But that's just my personality. Not everyone needs that rush. Marcus laughed. Kevin, you're talking to someone who probably hasn't seen a real deal in her life. No offense, Sarah, but branch banking isn't exactly high finance. None taken, I said calmly. Jennifer leaned forward, her face arranged in an expression of sympathetic interest. Sarah, I've been meaning to ask. Do you get good benefits at least? I always worry about people in those service jobs. Health insurance, retirement planning. You're preparing for the future, right? The benefits are adequate, I replied. Because if you need any advice, Marcus knows some great financial planners. I mean, it's never too early to start thinking about retirement, especially in jobs that don't have much upward mobility. Rachel looked up from her phone. Oh my God, yes. Sarah, you need to invest. Like, seriously. I've been making insane returns in crypto. I could send you some beginner resources. Even on a bank teller's salary, you can build wealth if you're smart about it. That's thoughtful, I said. Aunt Patricia swept over her perfume, announcing her arrival. Sarah, dear. You look well. Still at that little branch on Maple Street. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. 7 years now, Patricia. 7 years in the same position. The way she said it. The same way someone might say 7 years in prison or 7 years of drought. Like my career was a sentence I was serving, a trial I was enduring. Uncle Robert set down his drink with authority. 7 years. Sarah, I don't mean to be harsh, but that's a problem. In any career, if you're not moving up, you're moving out. Stagnation is death in the professional world. What's your plan? What are you doing to advance? I'm satisfied with my work, I said. But satisfied isn't enough. My father joined the conversation, his voice taking on that lecturing tone he used when he was about to dispense wisdom he assumed I desperately needed. You have to be hungry, ambitious. Look at your siblings. Marcus is on partner track. Rachel is building an empire. Even Kevin here, half your age, is managing hundreds of millions. 230 million, actually, Kevin interjected. As of last quarter. Exactly. My father gestured with his wine glass. That's ambition. That's drive. Sarah, we've discussed this before. You have the family name. You have a good education, even if you didn't do much with it. I could still make calls. Get you into hospital administration, something with more prestige. I appreciate that, Dad, but I'm happy where I am. The room fell into a particular kind of silence. The kind that happens when people are thinking the same thing but don't want to say it out loud. Finally, Marcus said what they were all thinking. Sarah, can I be honest with you? I'm saying this with love, okay? But you've got to have more ambition than this. You're 33 years old and you're working a job that a high school graduate could do. That's not happiness, that's settling. That's giving up. I haven't given up, I said quietly. Then prove it. His voice had an edge now. Do something. Take a risk. Stop hiding behind steady paychecks and decent benefits. Some people are meant to be extraordinary. Others are comfortable being ordinary. And Sarah, I hate to say it, but you've chosen ordinary. Jennifer touched his arm. Marcus, that's harsh. It's truth, he insisted. And someone needs to say it. We've all been tiptoeing around this for years, but Sarah needs to hear it. She's wasting her potential if she ever had much to begin with. The words hung in the air. My fingers tightened on my wine glass, but my face remained calm. Years of practice. Rachel at least looked uncomfortable. Marcus, come on. Sarah's doing her best. Is she, though? Kevin couldn't resist piling on. He had that particular cruelty of young men who've experienced early success and assume it's entirely due to their merit. Honestly, isn't it kind of embarrassing? Sarah's older than me by almost a decade, and she's doing work that my girlfriend's teenage daughter does part-time while she's in community college. The girl is 19 and she's a bank teller too. She makes $12 an hour. My mother made a small, distressed noise. Kevin, that's not necessary. I'm just being honest, Kevin said. If we really care about Sarah, we should be honest with her. She's completely stalled out. No upward trajectory, no prospects, no ambition. At some point, you have to call it what it is. Failure. Uncle Robert nodded slowly. The boy has a point, Eleanor. Sometimes kindness means truth. Sarah has had every advantage. Good family, good education, connections. And she squandered it all to be a bank teller. I didn't say I was a bank teller, I interjected quietly. But you work at a bank branch counting money and processing deposits, Aunt Patricia said. What else would you call it? I'd call it banking, I replied. Banking. Marcus laughed, actually laughed. Sarah, investment banking is banking. Private equity is banking. What you do is clerical work in the banking industry. There's a difference. My phone vibrated in my purse. Once. Twice. 3 times. The emergency pattern. I stood. Excuse me. I need to take this call. Now my mother's voice rose. Sarah, we're about to sit down for dinner. It's important. What could possibly be so important? My father's face was reddening. What emergency could a bank teller have on Thanksgiving? I walked toward the hallway without answering. Behind me, I heard Rachel's stage whisper. Probably her manager asking her to come in for Black Friday. Banks are probably crazy busy then, right? Poor thing, Jennifer added. Having to work retail hours at her age, I closed the door to my father's study and answered the phone. James. Sarah, thank God. Have you seen the news? No, I've been with family. What happened? Continental's CEO just resigned. Securities fraud investigation went public 30 minutes ago. The board is in complete chaos. The merger is at risk. Morrison wants you there immediately. He said Continental's board trusts you more than anyone in the Fed system. You're the only one who can salvage this. I walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway, the house that represented everything my family valued. How bad is it bad? Some board members want to kill the merger entirely. Others want to postpone. The stock is going to crater when Asian markets open unless we get ahead of this. Morrison thinks if you can get them to appoint an interim CEO tonight, issue a strong statement, we can contain it. But it has to be tonight. We have maybe 90 minutes before this becomes a full-blown crisis. Where's the board? Fairfield Country Club. 20 minutes from your location. I calculated quickly. The Continental merger was 8 months of work. $50 billion. Thousands of jobs. Regional economic stability hanging in the balance. Against that Thanksgiving dinner with a family who'd spent the last hour explaining why I was a disappointment. Not exactly a difficult choice. Tell Morrison I'm on my way. Have the car there in 15 minutes. And James, start pulling everything we have on Continental's CFO Patricia Chin. If we're elevating someone to interim CEO tonight, she's the best candidate. I need her full file, any concerns, any leverage points. On it. Sarah, thank you. I know this is your holiday. Crisis doesn't take holidays, I said. I'd said it before many times. It was true then and it was true now. I walked back to the living room where my family was moving toward the dining room. The table was set beautifully, my mother's inherited china gleaming under the chandelier. Name cards at each place. Mine was between Kevin and Uncle Robert. Of course it was. Sorry, everyone. I have to leave. My mother turned her face stricken. Leave. Sarah, no. We haven't even had dinner. There's an emergency at work. What kind of emergency? My father's voice was sharp. What could possibly require a bank teller on Thanksgiving? I picked up my purse, checked my phone. James had already sent the preliminary files. The kind that matters. I'm sorry. The food looks beautiful, Mom. Kevin laughed, actually laughed. An emergency. What did someone's ATM card get stuck? Maybe there's a computer glitch, Jennifer suggested. I hear those branch systems are ancient. Probably crashes all the time. Rachel had her phone up recording. Wait, this is actually happening. You're leaving Thanksgiving dinner for your bank teller job, Rachel. Put the phone down, my mother snapped. But she was looking at me with such disappointment, such complete incomprehension. Sarah, whatever this is, surely it can wait. It's Thanksgiving. Family comes first, does it? The words came out before I could stop them. Family comes first. Is that why I've spent the last 2 hours listening to everyone explain how I'm a failure? How I'm embarrassing? How I'm wasting my life? We're trying to help you, Marcus said. Someone has to tell you the truth. The truth. I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Right. Well, here's a truth for you. I have to leave because people are depending on me. Not because I'm being called in for an extra shift, not because an ATM is broken, but because there's a genuine crisis that requires immediate attention. That's all you need to know, Sarah. My father's voice had taken on his authoritative surgeon tone. You're being dramatic. Whatever this is, it's not more important than family. Sit down, have dinner, and deal with work tomorrow. I was halfway to the front door when I heard the cars. Multiple engines. Heavy doors closing. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. My father heard it too. He moved toward the door, his face already arranging itself into the expression he used when he was about to complain about something, probably neighborhood kids or delivery drivers. He opened the door and stopped completely still. I was standing in the foyer, purse in hand, when Chairman Morrison stepped into view. Even if you didn't follow financial news, you couldn't miss him. He had that presence that came from decades at the highest levels of power. The Secret Service agents flanking him only reinforced it. Behind them, I could see 3 black SUVs engines, running more agents positioned around the perimeter. It looked like a presidential motorcade, which wasn't far off. The chairman of the Federal Reserve wasn't quite the president, but he was close. I apologize for the disturbance, Morrison said. His voice carried easily, trained by years of testimony before Congress. I'm looking for Director Sarah Williams. I was informed this is her family's residence. The silence behind me was absolute. I could feel my family frozen in place, their brains struggling to process what they were hearing. Director, my mother's voice came out as barely a whisper. Morrison's eyes found me and relief flooded his face. Sarah, thank God. We have a critical situation developing. Continental's board is in complete disarray. Some members want to abandon the merger entirely. Others are proposing delays that would effectively kill the deal. We need you there immediately. He stepped further into the foyer, and my father actually backed up. Morrison didn't seem to notice. His focus was entirely on me. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. Continental's stock is going to plummet when Asian markets open in 90 minutes unless we can get ahead of this. The board trusts you. More importantly, they respect you. You're the only regional director who's successfully managed a crisis of this magnitude. I need you to take control of this situation before it spirals into something that affects the entire regional banking sector. I moved toward him, already shifting into work mode. What's the latest on board composition? How many members are on site? 11 of 13. Patricia Chin is holding them together, but barely. They need someone with authority to give them direction, and frankly, you're the only person in the Federal Reserve System I trust to close a $50 billion deal under this kind of pressure. $50 billion? That was my father, his voice strangled. Morrison glanced at him, seeming to notice my family for the first time. Yes. The Continental Banking Corporation merger. We've been facilitating it for 8 months. Director Williams has been the lead on the Fed side. Her analysis and oversight have been instrumental in getting us this far. It would be catastrophic to lose it now. I was pulling up information on my phone, already reading through James's files. Patricia Chin's record is solid. If we can get the board to elevate her to interim CEO tonight, issue a strong statement of stability, we can contain this. My thoughts exactly, Morrison agreed. Can you convince them? I can try. I looked up at him. Give me 2 hours. You'll have whatever you need. Full backing from the Fed, from Treasury. I'll be there personally. Good. Let's go. I started toward the door, but Morrison paused, looking back at my family. They were all there now, crowded into the foyer and spilling out from the dining room. Every single one of them was staring like they'd seen a ghost. I apologize for interrupting your holiday, Morrison said politely. But I'm sure you understand. When you have the best financial crisis manager in the Federal Reserve System in your family, sometimes you have to share her with the rest of us. We're lucky to have her. Then he turned and walked out, agents moving smoothly around him. I followed, but my mother's voice stopped me at the door. Sarah, wait. You're a director. Of the Federal Reserve? I turned back. They were all there, every person who'd spent the evening explaining my failures, cataloging my shortcomings, pitying my small life. They looked like I'd hit them with a brick. Yes, Mom. Regional Director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. I have been for 7 years, but… Marcus was shaking his head. But you said you worked at a bank branch. No. You all assumed I worked at a bank branch. I said I worked in banking, which is accurate. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York is a bank. It's just not the kind you were imagining. The branch on Maple Street, Aunt Patricia said weakly. You said. I said I knew the branch on Maple Street. Which I do. I own the building. I own 47 other properties in the financial district. The Fed compensates its regional directors well, and I've invested carefully. Kevin had gone absolutely white. You own buildings. Real estate is part of my portfolio, yes. I checked my phone. I really do need to go. This situation is time sensitive. Wait. Rachel stood up, her phone forgotten. You've been letting us think you were a bank teller. For 7 years, I've been letting you think whatever you wanted to think. You decided I was a failure, that I was ordinary, that I was wasting my life. Correcting you seemed pointless. You'd made up your minds. But why? My mother's voice broke. Why would you let us believe that I looked at her at all of them? Because you wanted to believe it. Because it fit your narrative. Because every time I tried to explain my work in those first months, you interrupted with advice about my resume or suggestions for other careers. You weren't listening to what I was saying. You were hearing what you expected to hear. So I stopped trying to make you hear something different. Sarah Elizabeth Williams. My father had found his voice, and it was shaking. Are you telling me that you've been a director of the Federal Reserve for 7 years and never told your family I'm telling you that I've been doing important work that you didn't care to understand? And now I need to go do more of it. Morrison isn't waiting because it's Thanksgiving. He's waiting because $50 billion and thousands of jobs are at stake. Marcus stepped forward. How are you a director? You'd have to be. You'd have to be. Exceptional, I supplied. Yes, I would. I am. You just never bothered to notice. I walked out the door. Morrison was waiting by the SUV, a slight smile on his face. That was satisfying to watch. It shouldn't have been necessary, I replied. Perhaps not. But sometimes people need to be shown the truth rather than told it. He gestured to the vehicle. Shall we? The ride to Fairfield Country Club took 20 minutes. Morrison spent it briefing me on the latest developments. The CEO's resignation was messier than initially reported. Not just securities fraud, but potential embezzlement. The investigation was expanding. The board was panicking. They need someone to tell them what to do, Morrison said. Someone they trust. That's you. They trust the institution I represent, I corrected. No, Sarah. They trust you. There's a difference. I've watched you work for 7 years. You have a gift for crisis management. You're calm under pressure, you see solutions where others see only problems, and you have the courage to make hard calls. That's not institutional authority. That's personal competence. I appreciated the compliment, but my mind was already on the problem ahead. If we elevate Patricia Chin tonight, we need to do it cleanly. No questions about process, no opportunities for challenges. The vote has to be unanimous if possible. Can you get unanimous? I can get close enough. The country club was lit up against the night sky, expensive cars filling the parking lot. Through the windows, I could see people clustered in the main conference room. The energy was agitated, chaotic. Morrison and I walked in together. The room fell silent. 11 board members, all of them high-powered executives, all of them looking at me with a mixture of hope and desperation. They'd worked with me before during the months of merger negotiations. They knew what I could do. Patricia Chin stepped forward. She was in her 50s, competent and professional, but she looked exhausted. Director Williams. Thank God. We've been trying to contain this, but it's spiraling. Tell me the timeline, I said. Last 3 hours. Everything. For the next 20 minutes, I listened. The CEO's scandal. The board's immediate paralysis. The fighting about next steps. The growing panic as they realized the Asian markets would open soon, and they had no plan, no leadership, no message. Through it all, I took notes on my tablet, asked precise questions, watched the board dynamics. Who deferred to whom? Who was rational and who was emotional? Who had hidden agendas? Finally, I set down my tablet and looked at them. Really looked. You're all intelligent people. So I'm not going to waste time with false comfort or empty reassurance. Your CEO committed fraud. Your succession planning was inadequate. And in 90 minutes when Hong Kong opens, you're going to face a market reaction that could destroy this institution unless you get ahead of it now. One board member, an older man who'd been arguing loudly when we arrived, bristled. We know that. We're trying to figure out solutions. No. You're panicking. There's a difference. I pulled up a presentation on my tablet and displayed it on the conference room screen. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to vote tonight to appoint Patricia Chin as interim CEO. Not acting CEO, not temporary CEO. Interim CEO with a clear 6-month term and specific performance metrics. We can't just rush a vote like that, another member protested. We need time to consider all options, maybe bring in an executive search firm. You don't have time. I advanced the slide. This is Continental's stock price over the last 5 years. Steady growth, good fundamentals. This is what will happen if you delay. The market will interpret your indecision as panic. Your stock will drop 20, maybe 25%. Your merger partners will get nervous. Some of your commercial clients will start moving deposits. Within a week, you'll have a run on your branches. Within 2 weeks, you'll be looking at FDIC receivership. The room went very quiet. Or I continued, you vote tonight. You elevate Patricia, who's been with this institution for 18 years, who knows your operations inside and out, who has the confidence of your staff. You issue a joint statement with the Federal Reserve and Treasury emphasizing Continental's strong fundamentals, your commitment to the merger timeline, and your confidence in your new leadership. You show the market that you're in control. That this isn't chaos, it's managed transition. And you think that will work, Patricia asked quietly. I think it's your only option that has a chance of working. The alternative is watching your institution collapse over the next month while you search for the perfect external candidate who doesn't exist. Morrison stepped forward. The Federal Reserve is prepared to issue a full-throated statement of support. We'll have Treasury on board within the hour. But we need decisive action from this board. Director Williams has laid out the path. I strongly suggest you take it. The board member who'd protested earlier wasn't done. This is highly irregular. Appointing an interim CEO without a proper search, without consulting shareholders, without time, I interrupted. You don't have time for proper processes. You have a crisis. Crisis requires different rules. I pulled up another slide. This is Washington Mutual, 2008. This is IndyMac. This is Wachovia. All of them failed because their boards hesitated when decisive action was needed. All of them thought they had time for proper processes. They were wrong. The silence was heavy now. Patricia spoke up. I didn't ask for this. I'm not campaigning for this position. But if the board believes I can serve the institution in this moment, I'm willing to do it. You're the best person for it, I said simply. You know the operations you have, relationships with the merger partners, and you're not tainted by whatever the CEO was involved in. You're clean, competent, and available. That's what this moment requires. Another board member, a woman in her 60s, raised her hand. I move that we vote immediately to appoint Patricia Chin as interim CEO for a 6-month term with performance reviews at 3-month and 6-month intervals. I second, someone else said quickly. All in favor, the chairman of the board asked. Hands went up. 1, then 3, then 5. I watched carefully. 7, 8, 9. 10 voted in favor. 1 against. 1 abstention. Motion carries, the chairman said. He looked at Patricia. Congratulations, Madam CEO. Now what now? I said. We craft a message. Morrison, can you get Treasury on the phone? The next hour was intense. Drafting press releases, coordinating with 3 different government agencies, making calls to major shareholders and partner institutions. Morrison and I worked in tandem, him providing institutional weight, me providing operational detail. Through it all, my phone kept buzzing. My family calling and texting. I ignored them all. There would be time for that later. Right now, thousands of jobs depended on getting this right. At exactly 8:47 p.m., with 13 minutes before the Hong Kong Exchange opened, we released the statement. Continental Banking Corporation had appointed Patricia Chin as interim CEO. The Federal Reserve and Treasury Department expressed full confidence in the institution's stability and the merger timeline. All operations would continue normally. The investigation into the former CEO was ongoing but had no impact on Continental's fundamental soundness. Then we waited. Hong Kong opened. Continental stock dipped 2%, then stabilized. Tokyo followed. Shanghai. By midnight, when European markets were starting their pre-opening activity, the narrative had solidified. Continental had handled a crisis decisively. Leadership was in place. The merger was proceeding. Crisis averted. Morrison poured himself a whiskey from the country club's bar. That, he said, is why you're the best. I was exhausted running on adrenaline and the satisfaction of a job well done. It was a team effort. It was your leadership. Don't diminish that. He raised his glass. To 7 years of exceptional service, Sarah. And many more to come. I touched my water glass to his whiskey. To Continental's continued stability. And to your family finally seeing you clearly. I laughed tiredly. I'm not sure that's worth toasting, perhaps not. But it's satisfying nonetheless. He set down his glass. Go home. Get some rest. We'll need you on monitors through the weekend, but you've earned a few hours of sleep. The drive back to Manhattan took an hour. My driver maintained professional silence while I monitored feeds on my tablet, watching the story spread through international financial news. By the time we reached my building in Tribeca, the narrative was set. Continental was stable. The merger was secure. Director Williams had orchestrated a masterful crisis response. My apartment was dark and quiet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city minimalist furniture, a space designed for someone who spent most of their time working. I poured a glass of water and stood at the window looking out at the lights. My phone said I had 63 missed calls, 82 text messages. I didn't read any of them. Not yet. Instead, I changed into comfortable clothes, made tea, and sat down to write the post-crisis analysis that would be required by Monday morning. Markets didn't sleep. Neither did regional directors. I finally went to bed around 4 a.m., my tablet still open beside me, monitoring overnight developments. The phone started ringing again at 7. I let it go to voicemail while I showered and dressed. By the time I made it to my favorite coffee shop, I had 12 more missed calls, all from family. I was reviewing European market reports when my mother's name flashed on the screen for the 15th time. I answered. Mom. Sarah Elizabeth Williams. Her voice was shaking. I have been calling you for hours. I was working. The Continental situation required monitoring through the European markets. You're really a director. Yes. For 7 years. Yes. I don't. She stopped and I could hear her crying. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? I sipped my coffee watching morning commuters hurry past. Would it have mattered? If I'd told you 7 years ago when I got the appointment, would you have believed me? Of course we would have. Would you? Really? Think back to that first Thanksgiving after I started. I tried to explain my work. What did Marcus say? Silence. He said it was a fancy title for a branch manager. He said institutions inflate titles to make people feel better about lateral moves. Dad asked what I did day to day, like he was trying to find the catch. Rachel decided I was helping to run a branch. None of you heard what I was actually saying. But Sarah, you could have corrected us. I tried. You weren't listening. And after a while, it seemed easier to just let you believe what you wanted to believe. But why would you do that? Why would you let us think so poorly of you? I set down my coffee cup. Because you wanted to think poorly of me. Because it fit your narrative. Marcus, the success. Rachel, the entrepreneur. Sarah, the disappointment. You'd built that story, and anything I said that contradicted it just sounded like defensiveness. That's not fair, isn't it? Last night before the phone call, what did Kevin say? What did Marcus say? What did you say, Mom? More silence. You called my career stagnation. Marcus called me ordinary, said I was comfortable with mediocrity. Kevin compared me to his girlfriend's teenage daughter. And you, Mom, you kept talking about how at least I had decent benefits, like that was the best I could hope for. All of you decided I was a failure, and nothing I said was going to change that. Sarah, please. We're all so sorry. We were wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Your father is devastated. Marcus hasn't stopped apologizing. Rachel is crying. We need to see you. We need to talk about this. Not today. Today I have work. The Continental situation is stable, but it needs careful monitoring. On Thanksgiving weekend, crisis doesn't take holidays, Mom. I've told you that. There was a long pause. Then, will you at least answer when we call? Please. We need to talk to you. I'll think about it. I need to go. I ended the call before she could respond. The text started immediately after. Rachel's message was long, emotional, apologetic. She'd had no idea. She was so proud of me. She'd always known I was capable of great things. That last part made me laugh. She'd literally called me a disappointment last night. Marcus's message was shorter, more formal. He acknowledged he'd been completely out of line. He hadn't known, hadn't understood, had made terrible assumptions. He hoped I could forgive him. Jennifer wanted investment advice. Kevin wanted to know if I was hiring. Aunt Patricia needed banking contacts. Uncle Robert had sent a formal email requesting I review his real estate portfolio. I responded to none of them. Instead, I spent Friday in my office monitoring markets, fielding calls from partner institutions, coordinating with Morrison's office. The Continental situation remained stable. Patricia Chin was handling her new role well. The merger was back on track. The weekend passed in a blur of work. By Monday morning, Continental's stock had actually risen slightly. The crisis had been averted so decisively that the market interpreted it as a sign of strength. Morrison called personally. "Exceptional work, Sarah. The Board of Governors is very pleased. I'm recommending you for a commendation. That's not necessary, sir. It's deserved. Take the win." He paused. "How's your family situation complicated?" "I imagine so. For what it's worth, they're idiots." I laughed despite myself. "They're my family. The two things aren't mutually exclusive." His voice softened. "Sarah, I've known you for 7 years. I know why you didn't tell them. People like us, we learn early that it's easier to let people underestimate us than to constantly defend our accomplishments. But you shouldn't have had to hide who you are from your own family." I wasn't hiding. I was just not correcting their assumptions. A distinction without much difference. "Anyway, I wanted you to know that your work last week was exemplary. The system is lucky to have you." After the call, I sat at my desk looking out at the Manhattan skyline. My phone had barely stopped buzzing all weekend. My family wanted reconciliation, wanted to apologize properly, wanted to make things right. Part of me wanted to let them twist in the wind a while longer. They'd spent 7 years making me feel small, unimportant, disappointing. Why should I rush to absolve them? But another part of me knew that holding a grudge required energy I didn't want to spend. I had work I cared about, a career I'd built despite their lack of support, a life that had nothing to do with their approval or disapproval. Maybe that was enough. On Wednesday, I finally responded to my mother's 18th text. I would come to dinner on Saturday. We could talk. The relief in her voice when she called was palpable. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. We'll make it right." I promise. I wasn't sure they could make it right, but I was willing to let them try. Saturday evening, I drove back to Connecticut. Same house, same driveway, but everything felt different. When my mother opened the door, her eyes were red and swollen like she'd been crying for days. "Sarah." She pulled me into a tight hug. "Thank you for coming." The house was quieter this time. Everyone was there, but the energy was subdued. No one was on their phones. No one was bragging. They all stood when I entered the dining room, like I was someone important who deserved respect. It made me sad, actually. That respect required a title, a dramatic reveal, proof of worth measured in billions of dollars and government authority. Dinner was uncomfortable. Everyone tried too hard. Kevin asked thoughtful questions about monetary policy. Marcus wanted to understand my career trajectory. Rachel expressed admiration for my achievements. It was better than the contempt, but it felt hollow. Finally, over dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Sarah, your mother and I need to say something. We've been talking all week, really examining our behavior. We're ashamed. We treated you terribly," my mother added. Her voice broke. "For years, we made assumptions, we judged you, we compared you unfavorably to your siblings. And we were completely wrong." Marcus leaned forward. "Sarah," I said unforgivable things. "I called you ordinary, mediocre. I implied you'd failed. I was so far out of line that I don't even know how to begin apologizing. I recorded you," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. "I was going to post it online, make fun of my own sister for entertainment. What kind of person does that?" Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "He patronized you. I compared you to people I pity." "I'm so sorry." Kevin had gone pale. "I said your job was embarrassing. I compared you to a 19-year-old. I was completely out of line. I listened to all of it. The apologies, the self-flagellation, the promises to do better. They meant it, I could tell. They were genuinely ashamed, genuinely sorry. But I also knew they wouldn't have been sorry if Morrison hadn't shown up. If I'd told them at dinner that I was a regional director, they wouldn't have believed me. They would have assumed I was exaggerating, inflating a minor position to sound important. It was the chairman of the Federal Reserve showing up with Secret Service agents that had convinced them. Not my words, not my truth, but an external validation they couldn't dismiss. I appreciate the apologies, I said finally. I do, but I need you all to understand something important. They leaned in, eager to hear whatever I had to say. My job isn't more valuable than a bank teller's job. The problem wasn't that you thought I was a teller. The problem was how you treated me because you thought I was a teller. The contempt, the pity, the constant comparisons, the judgment. That's what hurt. My father opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. If I really had been a bank teller working the same job for 7 years, would that have made me less worthy of your respect? Would that have made me a failure? Would that have justified the way you talked to me about me at me? The silence was absolute. Because plenty of people work as bank tellers. They're doing honest work. They're supporting themselves and their families. They're valuable members of society. And they don't deserve to be treated the way you treated me last week. Rachel was crying harder now. You're right. You're absolutely right. The problem isn't that you misunderstood my job, I continued. The problem is that you valued me based on what you thought my job was. My worth as a person, as your daughter, as your sister, was entirely contingent on your perception of my professional success. And when you decided I wasn't successful enough by your standards, you treated me like I was less than. My mother reached across the table trying to take my hand. Sarah, we love you. We've always loved you. Have you? Because love looks different than what I experienced. Love is respect, even when you don't understand someone's choices. Love is trust that the people you care about know what they're doing with their lives. Love is support without conditions. We want to do better, my father said. His voice was thick with emotion. Tell us how. Tell us what you need. I thought about it. What did I need from them? Time, I said finally. I need time to figure out if we can have a different relationship. One where I'm not constantly defending my worth. One where you don't measure my value by external markers of success. One where you actually know me, not the version of me you've constructed in your heads. Can we start now? Rachel asked. Could you tell us about your work? Really tell us what you do every day, so I did. I told them about the early mornings reviewing overnight market movements, about the constant balance between financial stability and economic growth, about the weight of decisions that affected millions of people, about crisis management and regulatory oversight and the satisfaction of preventing problems before they became catastrophes. For the first time in 7 years, they listened, really listened, asked thoughtful questions, showed genuine interest. It wasn't everything. It couldn't erase 7 years of dismissiveness. But it was something. When I left that night, my father walked me to my car. The December air was cold and clear. Your mother and I, he started, then stopped. We missed everything. 7 years of your life. Your achievements, your growth, who you became. We were so busy being disappointed in who we thought you were that we never saw who you actually are. I know. Can you forgive us? I thought about it honestly. I'm working on it. That's all I can promise right now. He nodded, then pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you. I should have said that 7 years ago. I should have said it every day. But I'm saying it now. I'm so proud of you. I drove back to Manhattan thinking about forgiveness and family and the ways we construct narratives that are more comfortable than truth. My family had built a story about me that fit their worldview, and I'd let them keep it because correcting them seemed exhausting. But maybe I'd enabled their narrative by not pushing back harder. Maybe I'd hidden behind their assumptions because it was easier than forcing them to see me clearly. Or maybe I'd just been tired. Tired of always having to prove myself, justify myself, defend myself to people who should have believed in me automatically. My phone buzzed. Another priority alert. A situation developing with a regional bank in Albany. Nothing critical yet, but worth monitoring. I smiled slightly and headed toward the office. Some things never changed. The work continued. The responsibilities remained. And somewhere in Connecticut, my family was probably still processing the gap between their assumptions and reality. They'd get there eventually. Or they wouldn't. Either way, I'd be fine. Because the thing about building your worth on your own terms is that it doesn't require external validation. It stands on its own. Solid. Real. Undeniable. And that ultimately was what mattered most. So here's what I want you to remember from my story. Your value isn't determined by other people's limited perception of you. It's not about the job title they think you have, the success they believe you've achieved, or the boxes they've decided you fit into. It's about knowing your own worth, doing work that matters to you, and building a life that reflects your values rather than their expectations. I spent 7 years letting my family believe I was ordinary because explaining the truth seemed pointless. They'd made up their minds about who I was and what I was capable of. And yes, that hurt. But it also taught me something crucial. When you stop seeking validation from people who are determined to misunderstand you, you find a different kind of freedom. The freedom to define success on your own terms. The freedom to build something real instead of something impressive. Was I petty for letting them go on thinking I was a bank teller? Maybe. But I was also tired. Tired of trying to prove myself to people who decided I wasn't worth their respect. So I stopped trying. And you know what? My career flourished anyway. My life moved forward anyway. Their opinion became background noise, annoying but ultimately irrelevant. Here's my question for you. Who in your life has made assumptions about you that you've stopped bothering to correct? And more importantly, are you living for their approval or for your own sense of purpose? Think about it. Share your story in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever let someone believe something false about you because correcting them wasn't worth the energy? I want to hear about it. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or dismissed by people who should have known better, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories matter. Your story matters. Let's keep this conversation going. Because at the end of the day, the most satisfying success isn't the dramatic reveal, the shocked faces, or the desperate apologies. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth regardless of whether anyone else sees it. That's the real victory. That's what lasts. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go build yours. And don't let anyone convince you that their limited vision of your potential is more accurate than your own understanding of what you're capable of achieving. Like, subscribe, comment. Let's talk about what happens when people finally see you clearly. I'll be reading every response.